We'll do the first mimer in Helik Aleph in Mamorim Meluket from the Rebbe. So this mimer is Yom Beis Derash Hashanah, Tavshin Chav Gimel, and the Rebbe said this mimer Yivchar Lonu es נחlתינו as Ga'on Ya'akov Asher Ohev Sela, a pasuk in which we say before Tkiyas Shofar that Yivchar Lonu es נחlתינו, and later on they published this mimer in the Kuntus Reish Hashanah in the year Tinosei, Tashinun Aleph, and this was in honor of Rosh Hashanah. And the date on it was the third day of Shlichus in the year Tavshin Nun, for that Rosh Hashanah coming the year of Tinosei. Learn the mimer inside. Yom Beis the Rosh Hashanah, Tavshin Chav Gimel. Yivchar Lanu es נחlתינו as Ga'on Ya'akov Asher Ohev Sela. So the pshat in the pasuk is that Hashem should choose for us our inheritance, meaning the Beis Hamikdash as Ga'on Yaakov Asher Ohev Sela, which is the pride of Yaakov, that Hashem loves for eternally. He should choose and give us back our Nachla. But the Rebbe is this mimer going to explain a mimer of the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe in Hemshech Rosh Hashanah Tavshin Gimel brings down the pasuk, has the same opening, and explains the pasuk according to the Targum. Meivi kveit kidushas meirichom admur. So my father-in-law, the Rebbe, in the mimer that opens up with this Dibur HaMaschil of Yivchar Lanu נחlתינו שבהמשך ראש השנה תש"ג, which is in the Hemshech of Rosh Hashanah Tavshin. In that Hemshech he brings this mimer. He brings down the Pirush HaTargum. The Targum translate. The Targum translates the Pirush HaTargum. Yare Lonu, Hashem should choose for us Limiras Yas Achsanta, to inherit the inheritance, which is the נחlתינו Yivchar Lonu, Yara Lonu Yas Achsante, which is Yas Beis Migdash of the Yaakov, the Rachim Loyal, which is the Beis HaMikdash of Yaakov. He calls it the Ga'on Yaakov, the Beis HaMikdash, the pride of Yaakov, that he loves forever. So that's the Targum of Yivchar Lonu es נחlתינו. That the נחlתינו is the Beis HaMikdash, which is the Ga'on Yaakov, the pride of Yaakov. So the Frierdiker Rebbe asks in the Maimer Umedayik Bazer, why do we refer to the Beis Hamikdash as our inheritance, meaning the inheritance of the Yidden? The Beis Hamikdash is a Beis Hamikdash for the Eibishter, not for the Yidden. Medayik Bazer, the Yidden server, whose Beis Hamikdash is it? It's the Eibishter Beis Hamikdash. Umedayik Bazer. So in the Maimer, he is Medayik, he questions how the Beis Hamikdash hu shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Isn't the Beis Hamikdash? The Beis Hamikdash is Eibishter's K'moshe Kosuf. The pasuk says, "V'asu li migdash." Make for me an Beis Hamikdash. So the sanctuary, the migdash, it's Hashem's. Make for Hashem. Yes, the Yisrael heim rak oisem es hamikdash. The Yidden make the migdash. Aval hamikdash atzmai, who the Yidden make it, is Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Beloma nikro Beis Migdash of the Yaakov. Why is it called the Beis Migdash of Yaakov? Ga'on Yaakov is the Beis Migdash of Yaakov. That's the question he asks over there. And we'll see in a second what the Frierdiker Rebbe explains in the Maimer. Gam, another question, Mahi Hashaychus the Ga'on Yaakov shekoya beis hamikdash l'Nachalaseinu. What's the connection of the pride of Yaakov, that beis hamikdash? How is that connected to our inheritance? Why is this? First question is, it's not ours, it's not Yaakov's, it's the Eibishter's. And then, Bechlal, what's the connection to our inheritance? The Rebbe is Mevayer in the Maimer, the Friedke Rebbe is Mevayer in the Maimer. Mevayer Baha Maimer, so the Maimer explains that the Nachaloseinu over here, when we say you should choose our inheritance, is Hunekudas HaYahadus HaShoire Benekudas Halev. Our inheritance, every Yid has inheritance, that point of Yiddishkeit that we inherit from our forefathers, and we have it. A Yid has in his DNA, in his essence, he inherits that point of Yiddishkeit. That point of Yiddishkeit rests in the point of the heart, inside in the Nekudas Halev. There is that level of Yiddishkeit, that point of Yiddishkeit, which we inherit. Shehu habeis hamikdash of the Yaakov. That inside part is actually a Yid. That's the Beis Mikdash. That's your Beis Mikdash. The question was, if we're talking about the Beis Mikdash that was built for all Yidden, so why is it going Yaakov? It's the Eibishter Beis Hamikdash. But here we're talking about the Beis Hamikdash as it's in the person's heart, in the heart of a Yid. And this is actually, he said before, you built for the Beis Hamikdash for Hashem, but no, we're actually, as we know, it's also for a Yid. The Beis Hamikdash, the Nekudas Halev, is also a Beis Hamikdash. Shehu Beis Hamikdash, the Yaakov. That Nekudas Halev is the Beis Mikdash of Yaakov. Commercial Kosov. The pasuk says, "V'osu limikdash v'shachanti b'soicham." Make for me a sanctuary, and I will dwell amongst you. So we learn that b'soichoi loy nemar ela b'soicham. The Eibush, the pasuk doesn't says, "I will dwell in it, in the Beis Hamikdash, the Mikdash, but I'll dwell amongst you." B'soicham, meaning that every Yid has a Beis Hamikdash. That Beis Hamikdash, that's the Nekudas Halev. B'toich kol echad v'echad Yisrael. So that's the interpretation according to the Rebbe is explaining that the Nachaloseinu over here is talking about the Yid, his inheritance, the Nekudas Halev, which is connected to the Ga'on Yaakov, to the Beis Hamikdash, which is in the Nekudas Halev. That Ohev Sela, that's how the Rebbe explains that. But of course, we have the simple meaning that to choose the Beis Hamikdash, the Eibush built for us the third Beis Hamikdash. So what's the connection between the Pashut Pshat and this interpretation that the Rebbe explains here? The simple meaning of Yivchar Lonu as Gein Yaakov that in the future the Eibishter will return to us our Beis Mikdash. So we need to understand what is the connection, the tie, the Hapirusha B'Hamaimer to the Maimer Shagoin Yaakov Koi al Beis Hamikdash Shebekol Echad Ve'echad Mi Yisrael. That the Ga'on Yaakov refers to the Beis Hamikdash, which is in every Yid. That is where the Ga'on Yaakov is on his personal Beis Hamikdash that every Yid has. Ima Pirush HaPoshut Ga'on Yaakov Koyal Beis Hamikdash HaShlishi Sheibonu B'mheira B'yemenu, with the Pshat, the simple meaning that the Ga'on Yaakov goes on the third Beis Hamikdash that will be built quickly in our days. The Rebbe explained, the Rebbe wants to know what's the connection. The Rebbe will explain that which will be revealed in the future in the Beis Hamikdash Hashlishi is associated with the Nekudas Halev which a Yid has. And that's the connection, as the Rebbe will explain, that these things, that the La'asid Lavoi, the Giluyim of La'asid Lavoi, then the essence of the neshama will be niskala at that point, and therefore, when they call Ga'on Yaakov the Nekudas Halev, it's connected to the Beis Hamikdash Hashlishi, which is at that time the things will be revealed niskala in La'asid Law. Okay, so now the Rebbe wants to explain how all these inyanim are connected to uh, the Tkiyas Shofar. Now, Tkiyas Shofar has, the Rebbe is going to explain, has several aspects in it. The Rebbe is going to, at length, going to explain. Tkiyas Shofar is something that we do, meaning that's Isaruso Dilatato, and we accomplish. And we also say these Mizmorim. And Tkiyas Shofar basically is a Saruso Dilatato that brings down and makes a change. Like the Medrash says, when we blow the shofar, the Eibishter switches from the Kisei Din to Kisei Rachamim, but it's an Eserusa Dilatato. But the fact is that through Tkiyas Shofar, there's another aspect which we bring out the level of Bechira of a Yid through our Tkiyas Shofar. Even though the level of Bechira that the Eibishter chose is beyond, it's something comes milamaylo from Hashem, not as something that we are able to elicit through Yisrusu Dilatat, and yet it does come, as the Rebbe will explain. Let's look inside. Base. So first the Rebbe just made the introduction that what does it mean the Eibishter should give us the Ga'on Yaakov, our נחltינו, the Ga'on Yaakov? It means the personal Beis Hamikdash. So how do we connect it to the Beis Hamikdash Hashlishi, which is the Pashut Pshat? V'hinei, Pasuk Zehu b'hamizmer she'omrim zayin pa'omim koidem tkiyas shofar. This pasuk of Yivchar Lones נחlתינו is in that chapter of Tehillim that we say 7 times before tkiyas shofar. Before we blow the shofar, we say in Perik Mem Zayin. So we say the whole Perik Mem Zayin in Tehillim, we say it 7 times. So, because I am Vashayich is the Mizmer Zeh Litkiyas Shofar Bepashtusu. Why do we read this Mizmer? Simply saying, why does this Mizmer have to do with Shofar? It seems like one pasuk in this Mizmer has a connection to Shofar. It's not this pasuk we're discussing about here, Yivchar Lonu es נחlתינו. It seems like a very specific, another pasuk has to do within this. It talks about the shofar. That's why we read it. The pashtus, b'ashayich is the mishma zelit ki shofar b'pashtus. So on the simple level, why do we say this perek before ki shofar? Ki b'mizmer zeh nemar Allah elikim betrua havaye b'koil shofar. The mizmer, it says that the elikim goes up with truas. That means in the beginning, there is in Pasuk Vav that in the beginning, the Eibishter goes up with Elikim, with the Nevel of Elikim. So what do we find in Drasha? And then is Havaya through the Koil Shofar. V'amr Razal, so our sage, the blessed memory, explains, Shebetchila HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yoshev ve'oila al kisei din. That to begin with, Hashem sits and goes up. Allah Al Kisei Din, he starts off the day of Rosh Hashanah on the throne of judgment. Allah Elikim Bisru. As the pasuk starts off, Allah he goes up, it's Elikim. Betrua. Ba'al Yidei She Yisrael Neitlim as Shofreya. Through the Yidden taking their shofar, v'toikin lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the below before Hashem, who oimed mekisei din v'yoshe mekisei rachmim. So he gets up from the throne of judgment and sits on the throne of compassion, of rachamim. That's why the pasuk says Havaye b'kol shofar. Once we have kol shofar, we get Havaye. Even though lechatchila it's Allah Elikim, you have Elikim, but it's Havaye b'kol shofar. Umismale, the continuation of the sages is Mismale Aleihem Rachamim. And Hashem fills up them with compassion. Umerachim Aleihem, and He has mercy on them. V'hoifech Aleihem, and He swaps on them Midas Hadin Lerachamim, the measure of judgment for Rachamim. So, simply, V'lochin Emri Mizmar Zekoidim Ksiyas Shofar. That's why we say before Kiddush Shofar, because we're going to blow the shofar. The shofar is going to accomplish that the Eibishter is going to get up from the throne of judgment and going to sit down on the throne of Rachamim. So we say this mizmar before the blowing of the shofar. Allah Kim betru Hashem b'kol shofar b'chdei lahavi rayim min haTorah, in order to bring a proof from the Torah ala hamshacha, what we're going to draw down. The Oimed Mekisei Din v'Yoshe Mekisei Rachamim. We're saying that he gets up from the throne of judgment and he sits on a throne of compassion. Sha'idei Tkiyas Shofar, which is accomplished before Tkiyas Shofar. The Rebbe wants to say, the fact is that also this pasuk of Yivchar Lonu, we also say before, it's in the same mizmer, in the same chapter. And we say that also. So if all is just like the Pashta Pshat, we're saying the Mizmar because Ola Lakim Betrua, why don't we just say that pasuk? Why are we saying the whole Mizmar before Tkiyas Shofar? It must mean that the rest of the Mizmar is also connected. So even this pasuk that we're discussing here in this Maimer, Yivchar Lones נחltינו, which comes before Ola Lakim Betrua. So, Muban Shekol it means that it's all connected also. That when the Eibishter, when we blow the shofar, not only is Ol Elikim B'Trua, but it's also Yivchar Lonu when we blow the shofar. V'hinei. From the fact that before Tkiyas Shofar we say, Lo rak posuk zeh, not only the posuk of Ol Elikim B'Trua, Ella is called HaMizmar, what we're saying, the entire Mizmar, the entire chapter, move on, it's understood. Shakol HaPesukim, the HaMizmar, Shayochim, that all the verse of the Mizmar have a connection, Lihinyan, the Oimed Mekisedin, V'yoshe B'kisarachim, to this idea that when we blow the shofar, the Eibishter stands up from the Kisedin, Yoshe B'kisarachim, it's also Shalidei Tkiyas Shofar. Tkiyas Shofar accomplishes that the Eibishter stands up from the Kisedin Yeshiv Kisarachamim. That is also connects to the other psukim. Umekolshkein haposik Yivchar Lonu, especially this posik of Yivchar Lonu that we're discussing in this Maimer, shehu bismichas lahaposik Ola Elikim Betrua, which is next to the posik Ola Elikim Betrua. So it means that it should have a connection that through the Tkiyas Shofar, just like Ola Elikim Bisruah, the pasuk next to it is also connected, Yivchar Lonu, also through Ola Elikim Bisruah. Shezeh Moira. That points the fact that we say it next to it, and it's next to the together before Tkiyas Shofar, and it's next to the pasuk of Ola Elikim Betrua. That this point, Shapasuk Zeh Shaykh Ola Elikim Betrua, that this Yivchar Lones נחltינו has to do with Trua, which means basically that the Tkiya Shofar brings about that Yivchar Lonu es נחlתינו. That would mean that the Tkiya Shofar has the effect, through the blowing of the Shofar of a Yid, has the effect to bring down that the Eibishter should choose us. But the question is, the Rebbe asked, the idea of choosing of the Eibishter is in a place which is higher than Isarusa de Latata. The Shofar doesn't seem to be able to elicit, to bring about the Bechira which is higher. We need to understand the Inyan Yivchar Lonu, who the idea of Yivchar Lonu, that he should choose us. Who? What is this idea, choosing us? Choosing us is Shabechira da Kodesh Baruch Hu. When we say choose us, when we talk about the Kodesh Baruch Hu choosing B'Yisrael, he mitzad atzmei. That is on its own. The Eibishter chooses the Yidden not because there's some mila, not because they're doing something, not because they're eliciting. It's on its own. Mitzad atzmei. V'loi sheha'avoida di Yisrael ma'oreres sheyivcher b'hem. And it's not that the avoida of a Yid arouses that Hashem should choose them. As to say, Allah lekim betrua, like when they blow the shofar, this will bring out that Hashem will choose us. Choosing of the Eibishter in a Yid is on his own, not because the Yid does something. B'yiseda mizu, so not only actually the choosing of a Yid doesn't come from a play, from the elicitation from a Yid Isarusa, it's Bechlal a place where Isarusa de Latata, the blow, cannot touch over there. We say to him is with Inya Bechira hu ba'atzmus. Inya Bechira is an atzmus. To really choose is atzmus, the essence of Hashem. Shein Shaykh Shomho Inya Isarusa de Latata. Over there, it doesn't apply the idea of the arousal from below. So what are these 2 points? A, it doesn't take place through Isarusa Dilatata. And B, it's choosing is from a place which is Ruslatata has no connection there, has no access to Atzmos. V'hainu. The noise of Lozeh Shabich Yireh Bepoyel. He mitzad atzmei. In addition, that the actual choosing is Hashem chose on his own. It's not that it's aroused through the arousal of below. So that's number one. So it's not it's not through Tkiya Shofar, it's on its own. But more than that, but in that place from where Bechira comes from, it doesn't even apply, it doesn't fit at all to arouse it through Isarusa de Latata, because Isarusa de Latata, the arousal from below, has no access to the level of Atzmus from which Bechira comes. And on the other hand, the Inyan Olalakim Bisruah Goimerhu, and the Inyan Olalakim Bisruah is Shetkiyas Shofar the Yisrael, that the blowing of the Shofar of a Yid Mo'ireres Sheyiyah Oymed Mekisadin V'yeshe Bekisarachimim, that this arouses that the Eibishter should stand from Kisidin. That's the next post, the post Olalakim Bisruah, that Hashem should get up from the throne of judgment and the Yoshev and Nisid's Kiserachmim. That's something which the Yid do. The blowing of the shofar does that. Umasmicha zishne psukim, but the fact that we two psukim are next to each other, mashma dishnei ha'inyonim shayochim zelazeh, that these are connected to each other. That just like the shofar is ma'orer, that it should be from kisei din to yesha b'kisei rachamim, from olalikim to havaya because shofar, that this is also the yivchar lanu נחלתינו, that it is connected. V'hainu da'al yidei she Yisrael noitlim as shofreihem v'toikim lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, through the Yidden taking their shofars and they blow before Hashem, the Tchiyas shofar. Hey mamshichim, so they bring down loy rak harachamim hamis'oirim al yidei avodo, not only the compassion which arouses through avodo, which means there is the level Yoshev al Kisei Rachamim, which is the direct consequence, which is elicited from the Tchiyah Shofar, the Avodah of the Yidden. They take the shofar and they blow. Serusu de Le'ela Shemesereres al de Serusu de Latato. That would be an arousal of above, that Hashem changes his throne through al Serusu de Latato, to the arousal of below, through our Avodah, through our Tchiyah Shofar. But here we see shal yidei zeh mamshichim hem kam rachamim shemitzad b'chiras HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'Yisrael. On top of that, they also bring down the level of rachamim, which comes because of the fact that Hashem chose the Yidden, Yivchar lanu, that even in the level of b'chira. So you see from the pasuk and the connection and these psukim, that the impact of Tchiyas Shofar is not only in the place where the Isarusa de Letato impacts and brings the Isarusa de Le'ela, but they also impact and they bring down from the level which is not connected through Isarusa de Letato, which brings down the higher level of the level of Bechira, where Hashem chooses us, that there's going to be Rachamim from that level which Hashem chooses us, which is actually a higher level of rachmim, which comes down lower because it comes from atzmus, and it's a rachamim which is more profound than the rachamim that we get from Ayvid Mekisadina Kisarachim Bepashtus, from the level where the Sarusa de Latata does reach. It's all going to be explained by the Rebbe now exactly. So here we came up now with a new idea that Tchiyas Shofar accomplishes a lot more than it seems on the surface, that it's Avodah, which can only bring down Isarusa de Letate, Isarusa de Leila. Here we're seeing that the Tchiyas Shofar actually accomplishes it, that it also brings down from a level of Yivchar Lanu. The Rebbe is going to bring evidence that this is so from another thing that it's known in Chassidus, that really is what's going on the Rosh Hashanah, the Binyan HaMalchus, and we know that Binyan HaMalchus has to be all the ways from Atzmus. So this concept that Atzmus is what comes down with Tchiyas Shofar has to do with the whole idea that on Rosh Hashanah we built Malchus, which essentially means that Atzmus builds Malchus, as the Rebbe will explain. Gimel. Yes, Lois, if we can add the Inyan Hanal, the above idea, Shal Yidei She Yisrael Toikim B'Shofar, Mamshichim Heim Gam Ha'inyan De B'Chiras Ha'asmus, that through the Yidden blowing in the shofar, they can also bring down the idea of B'chiras Ha'atzmus, Yivchar Lanu, that takes place through the shofar. She'ein shaykh la'irish shamayde surus latata, which it doesn't fit, doesn't apply. You can't wake it up through surus latata, and yet through shofar we bring down even that level of bechira. So move on gamma, you do this also understood from what we know. She'ikir inyan Rosh Hashanah hu binyan hamalchus. That the main idea of Rosh Hashanah is what we're doing. We're building malchus. Building malchus, meaning the whole world, all the chayis comes from malchus the atzilus, and out of Rosh Hashanah, the chayis, the pnimius of the malchus, is sort of leaves, it goes back to its source. Only the chitzonius remains, as the Rebbe will explain, and the Rosh Hashanah, and through the Tkiyah Shofar, we build Malchus, we bring back the Rotzin and the Tainuk, the will and the pleasure of Malchus, that the Eibishter should want to be the king. So it'll be the Pnimius, we're building the Pnimius of Malchus. Kamayim Razal, where do we see that Rosh Hashanah has to do with building Malchus? Why? What does that have to do with building Malchus? Kamayim Razal, because the saying of our sages, as the saying of our sages of blessed memory, say before me Malchus, so that you make me a king over you. What are we saying that it's building Malchus? So we're saying make me a king, that's the main idea, make it a king, but we know that mitzvahs are yom b'shofar. So why did Chazal sages tell us that the mitzvah is shofar, not malchus? So here we say that also, how do we accomplish the tamlichuni, to make Hashem a king over us, is through tkiyah shofar. So here we see also, what builds malchus is tkiyah shofar. As the continuation of the above mentioned saying, so how do we accomplish tamlichuni aleichem through the shofar? But what's the goal of shofar? Is tamlichuni aleichem, is to make a Eibishter king, to build malchus, to make the level of malchus. Why do we have to build malchus on Rosh Hashanah? Very simply, what's the connection of building Malchus on Rosh Hashanah? He said building Malchus all the time, need building Malchus. Why are we blowing the shofar to Tamlichuni Aleichem to build Malchus on Rosh Hashanah? Lefi sheberosh Hashanah chidush ma'aseh bereishis. On Rosh Hashanah there is a renewal. We have to build Malchus because we're starting all over again. It's a renewal of the Ma'aseh Bereishis. K'moshe Imrim, like we say, Zeh hayoim tchilas ma'asecha. This is the day in which your actions of creation begin, which means literally every Rosh Hashanah begins creation over again. The Eibishter is building what he did in the beginning of creation. This is the day that you start Ma'asecha. Shebechol Rosh Hashanah mishavin kol ha'olamis mechodesh. On every Rosh Hashanah, all worlds that were created are recreated again. K'moi shahoya bepam harishona, like they were in the very first time. How so? Everything started from Malchus, and we need to bring back, renewed on this Rosh Hashanah, bring back the Binyan HaMalchus so that there will be the Ma'aseh Bereishis again. Because here we're doing Ma'aseh Bereishis every Rosh Hashanah. But Inyan Hu, the idea is these Havus Kol Ha'olomes Himimidas Malchus Yisbarach. The creation of all the worlds comes from the Eberster's level of Malchus. Malchus of Atzilus is what creates the Hamshach of godliness. To create the world comes from the level of Malchus. The Hamshachas HaMalchus Shebechol Rish Hashanah, and this, what's extended of Malchus to create every year, Koilul Galm Rosh Hashanah Rishon Shebetchilas Abriya, which also Obri Rosh Hashanah, even the very first Rosh Hashanah in the beginning of creation, Hirak al Shana Achas. That's only for 1 year. There's Hamshocha, a 1 year Hamshocha that comes down. Even the very first time was just for 1 year. Ube'erev Rosh Hashanah im Kashecha, and on the Erev Rosh Hashanah as it gets dark, Hi Chayzeres va'oila v'nichleles b'mekoyres. So Malchus, which created and therefore lowered itself into the worlds of beyond all of creations, goes back to its source. So how does the world exist if there's no more Amshach of Malchus? No. Chitzoni is HaMalchus, that remains, like all the time, like before. It's only that the Rotzin and the Tainug of creation, that it's in Malchus, leaves, which means it's happening, it's done, but it's done in a way of like a faint way, not with the Pnimis. Elo, Shahaliyah v'hasiluk hurak b'pnimis hamalchus. This elevation that we're talking about Malchus, and that Malchus in Chashecha B'erev Rosh Hashanah goes up and is removed, hurak b'pnimis hamalchus. It's only pnimis malchus. Shehu hatainug v'rotzen shebemalchus. That's the pnimis hamalchus, means the delight and the desire in the malchus. So before we blow the shofar, the world is still in existence from Chitzonis HaMalchus. V'achai is the oilam b'Rosh Hashanah, and the life force of the world in Rosh Hashanah, gam lifnei ho'inyan detam lichuni aleichem, even before the idea that we make Hashem a king, which is binyan HaMalchus, even before that, before we have bring back the Tainug and Rotzin in Malchus, hu'michitzonis HaMalchus, that's still from the externality of Malchus. This can be compared to a person who does work when he's tired and his hands are weak. He doesn't have a delight, so he's still doing, but there's no enjoyment, there's no desire, he's just tired. That would be the comparison how the world lives from Malchus without the Pnimius of Malchus. And as the known expression, at the night of Rosh Hashanah, before we have the Tam Lichuni Aleichem, the world is in a condition of faint. And a person faint, there's no Pnimis. Malchus is removed, the Pnimis of Malchus. And this is what it means. Imru lefonai malchios, kedei shetam lichuni aleichem. Say Malchus, so you make me a king. So that Hashem should have the desire and the delight in being a king. So we are basically accomplishing, this is the main thing of Rosh Hashanah, is to make the Eibishter that the Pnimius, Harotzin, and Tainuk should be in the Melucha, in the Hamshoch. So, where do we need to bring back the Pnimius, the Rotzin and Melucha? It is all the ways up to the highest level, because when Malchus is mistalik and it goes up to the highest level, we have to start all over again, all the way from the top, to bring down the Malchus that Rotzin and Tainig in Melucha. and it's known Sha'asiluk sheberesh Hashanah b'chol hamadreges, that the sealing of Rosh Hashanah is at all levels. In Maisa, the Eibishter's action of creation, the dibur of creation, the machshava of creation, the midas v'seichel, all the midas v'seichel of Atzilus, there is a removal. Everything is removed, not just from Malchus, not only from the level of Maisa, dibur machshava, everything is elevated. While the Chola Dvarim Chayzin Lekadmusam, everything goes back to its earlier stage, which without having the Pnimius, we have to start over again. So, therefore, where do we start? We start with Atzmos, the very first point. Amshachas HaMalchus, Rotzim V'tainug Meluket. So, where do we bring down to Rotzim Meluket? B'Rosh Hashanah, Hi Al Yidei Shemamshichim Ma'atzmos Oirein Sof. So, we bring down all the way to Ma'atzmos Sof, because all Madregas go up, and we have to start over, so we can start with the Atzmos. So, what do we see from here? That one of the main things of Rosh Hashanah is to build the Malchus, is to start over again. And starting over again means bringing down from Atzmos. And how do we do that? We said before, Ubameh b'shoifer. From the fact that we say that Tamlichuni Aleichem comes from Tekiya Shofar, like we said before, move on, it's understood, Shetkiya Shofar Magas Ba'atzmus Ein Sof. Understand that the Tekiya Shofar reaches all the ways to the essence of the Ein Sof, because we start there. So we have a similar idea, like we said before, that Yivchar Lonu es נחlתינו is also accomplished through the Tekiya Shofar, not just Mikisa Havaya, from Elikim to Havaya, all Elikim, but also the Yivchar Lonu is accomplished, and it comes in a place where Bechira Atzmos. Similar idea over here, because on Rosh Hashanah we have to do Binyan HaMalchus, and Binyan HaMalchus starts off with Atzmos. But before we had the question, since it's a level of Bechira, how could Tekiya Shofar, the Isarusa de Latata, impact a place which is Bechira, which is Atzmus, which is not touchable or not connected to Isarusa de Latata? How could Tekiya Shofar elicit that? The same thing over here. The Rebbe is asking, how could Tekiya Shofar be the one, Al-Yidei Shofar, to bring down from the level which is the level of Atzmos, which is the level of Binyan HaMalchus, which we need Atzmos to build. So we need to understand. How the Tekiya Shofar hi mitzvah? The Tekiya Shofar is a mitzvah. So to put in the word of Malchus, only after you have Malchus, you have a government, you have a king, the king makes gezeres to you. So the mitzvah Shofar in the Pashut sense is a mitzvah. How could the mitzvah bring Malchus when you need Malchus in order to have a mitzvah? You can't have a mitzvah without a king. It's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah. That only fits after the Eibishter became a king. Kimaimer, like we say, why does Shema Yisrael, the parasha, come before V'hoyim Shemaya? So we say, Kablu Malchusi, first we have to accept the Eibishter's kingdom, Tchila, and say, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. V'achach Egzer Alechem Gzeiros, then V'hoyim Shemaya Tishmo, then Hashem will make you decrees, so you have mitzvahs. So it has to be a king first before we can do mitzvahs. So, but here we're saying, in order for the Eibishter to king over us, and in order the Eibusha should want a king over us, which meaning we're saying the psukim, we're making him for a king. So, hu ha'idei shemagim ba'atzmus ein sof. It's by reaching all the way to atzmus ein sof to bring down that rotzin and tainuk in Malchus, in the creation, is by reaching all the way to atzmus ein sof. So from there to be the rotzin and tainuk, k'moshu lifnei l'maylo shenasa melech. That is before and above that he became a king. That's where we need to bring down the binyan hamalchus tamlichuni alechem. Ve'eich efsher shal yidei tkiyas shofar. How is it possible? Through blowing the shofar, kiyum mitzvah zitziv hamelech, which is fulfilling the mitzvah and the command of the king. Yaso yisiz baruch lamelech. How could make him a king? Through a mitzvah of the Eibishter, when we're just making him a king and we're reaching up to the place for a start to become the Malchus. So what is here we see it? So we see it in both cases. We see it saying the idea that we're bringing down the level of Bechiras Ha'atzmus in order the level of Rachamim from a higher place than Havayin Alikim to bring down. And here we're seeing to build the Malchus. So we have to say, move on. The Tkiyas Shofar Shnei Inyonim. That in Tkiyas Shofar we have two ideas in Tkiyas Shofar. HaMitzvah de Tkiyas Shofar. There's one the mitzvah of Tkiyas Shofar. V'zeh shal yidei Tkiyas Shofar magim ba'atzmus ein-sof shel l'mayla b'chinas melech. And also that through the Tkiyas Shofar we reach the atzmus ein-sof, which is higher than the level of melech. And therefore, you can have the binyan hamalchus from the level of atzmus, which is not the mitzvah part of the tkiya, but that's another aspect in the tkiya shofar, and that reaches that higher level. In a similar way, that reaches the level of Yivchar נחלתינו that we said before. Not only ola lekim betru abai b'kol shofar, but also in the level of Yivchar as נחלתינו.